Welcome everybody to this training event on Wildflowers of Road Verges. This is one of a series of training courses being supported by Leicestershire County Council in order to kind of boost the identification skills of volunteers and those interested in nature in general. We're very lucky today to have Russell Parry to lead the event for us, and I'll hand over to him in a minute. As I'm sure you're all aware that have booked onto this at this point, that this introduction will be followed up by a site meeting on Sunday, and we'll just say a few words about that later. So over to you, Russell.
Thanks, David. I'm going to test that it will move on. It does. Good. Good. I shall just read the beginning of this, but then it'll be more ad lib later on. The only trouble is the text is obscured by the pictures on the left. Oh, I'll tell you what I can do, get rid of those. That's better. Right, good. So warm welcome to everybody who's come to find out a little bit more about how to identify the wildflowers of Verges. It's absolutely brilliant that you're interested in the Leicestershire habitats and the wild plants growing in them. Not only is it thrilling to show you some of these delights, but also it's an honour to be able to encourage activities involving the excellent website NatureSpot in its partnership with Leicestershire County Council. I'm going to try to help you recognise and name 45 of the wildflower species you are most likely to see in our verges. Grasses are also flowering plants, but I'll introduce these in a following session. Taxonomists have allocated all of these species to families to show when species are closely related. And also the families themselves are organised by taxonomists to show the stages of vascular plant evolution. Because presenting the species family by family can help with their identification, I'll introduce today's 13 families in evolutionary order. And that's partly because many identification books do display the plants in this family order. I will be using a number of technical terms that you'll have to get used to when you're looking at the various parts of a plant for identification. Please be patient and keep repeating these names of parts until they become familiar. I'll introduce them as we work through the families. And I'm a little unsure how many people are watching live, but if you do have questions, if I'm not making myself clear, don't be afraid to interrupt, and I'll try and help explain. Now, this is an important note of caution before we actually get started on the ID. There are many more than 45 species, more than the 45 species that are illustrated here. The chances are that if the specimen matches the ID shown, it is that species. But if the match is not quite right, please take clear photos and get the specimen checked out before you record it. Okay, here we go. Where's my cursor? There it is. Right, so we're going to start with the Buttercup family, which is a very straightforward and simple kind of flower. And while I'm doing the whole of this introduction, you'll see from time to time this little star. And that means that the species is one which would help you to identify a slightly less or even unimproved meadow. So they're, if you like, the more exciting species to find, because they'll show you that you've got a habitat which has not been disturbed for some time. Okay, so buttercups, they have many carpels which are not fused together. Carpel is a word which means it's the female part of the plant which develops into seed or seeds. And in this species, we have a number of carpels. Each one of those little yellow blobs in the center there is a carpel. Also with the buttercup family, you have many stamens, and they're arranged around the outside of the carpels surrounding it. Each one of these bodies here, which you can see all around the buttercup there, that's an individual stamen. And in fact, that's an anther, which is the bit that bears the pollen. And there we are. Buttercups have 5 petals, which are not joined together, joined to one another. They're joined to the base, obviously, of the flower, but they're not joined to one another. Okay, now the first of these buttercups, this is a starred one to get a little bit excited about, is the Meadow Buttercup. And the special features that help you work this one out are that its leaves are lobed. These, we call these deep divisions in the leaf a lobe, but it's not, they're not cut right to the center of the leaf. So it's just a single leaf with very deeply cut lobes. And the sepal on this, or sepals on this species, they are firmly up against the back of the petal. In other words, this explains it. The sepal, in some species, you'll see in a minute that the sepal is folded right back, but in this species, it's up against the petal. And you probably can see from this photograph that the flower stem, the pedicel, is smooth round. It doesn't have a groove running from top to bottom, bottom to top. Meadow Buttercup. Creeping Buttercup, which is quite an invasive species, can be distinguished by the fact that it has leaflets, not just a single leaf, but a leaf clearly divided into separate units. These are leaflets. And the end or apical leaflet has a stalk, which does not apply to the Meadow Buttercup. Once again, the sepals are flat against the back of the petal, but the stem is now clearly grooved. It's not smooth and round, but it has a groove. So Creeping Buttercup, apical leaflet stalked, sepals not bent back, and the stem has a groove. And finally, in our 3 buttercup trio, another special one with the star, here the sepals are now reflex, bent right back against the stem, and the stem is grooved. So that's a nice, easy distinction. Oh, sorry, I'll try and go back. No, I can't go back. Here we go. And that's the bulbous buttercup. Good. Okay, we're moving on to a different family now, the pea family. And this can be distinguished by the flowers, which have a standard and 2 wings. Here's the standard. This is what we call the standard. This is actually 2 petals fused together. And they're the, if you like, the upper part of the flower, the standard. And the wing, that's 1 wing, and there's another wing next to it, a pair of wings. Okay. And then with the pea family, the sepals, which are here, are now fused. As you can see, there's teeth that indicates that the individual sepals, but they're fused together for most of their length to form what we call a calyx tube. Now, those are the features that give you a plant which belongs to the pea family. In this case, the leaves have many leaflets. This organ here is part of one leaf, but it has many small separate units, which we call leaflets. This leaf eventually ends in a tendril, which you can just make out there. So that's as far as that will grow. This is one leaf with many leaflets. And this particular species is common vetch. Okay, here's some more pictures of common vetch. You can see the tendrils. You can see with common vetch that there are not very many flowers in each group, 1 to 3 flowers in each little bunch or axil of the stem. And the fruits of common vetch do not have, they're not very hairy, they don't have many hairs. There is a fairly similar looking species, but I expect you'll notice straight away it has more than 3 flowers and coming from the axil. And the other thing that you'll notice, I hope, is that the leaf base, the leaf is widest nearer the base. A lot of narrow, and it widens, and it's if you like, it's ovoid. It's got the widest part of the leaf nearer to its base. This is bush vetch, and I've just put up another common vetch picture for you to contrast, so you can see these leaflets have their widest part much nearer the middle. And interestingly, they do have this rather flat top with a little micros each one, which is quite useful for identification. Okay, still with the pea family, we are now moving to the clovers and trefoils, which have leaflets, but only 3 leaflets per leaf, hence trefoil. And here we've got 2 different clovers. They're easy to, the names are easy to remember. One with white flowers is white clover. And in this case, the leaflets are glabrous. They're not hairy. They're nice and sometimes even shiny. Whereas the red clover, which is a bit more of a species to get excited about, has hairy leaflets. You can see that quite clearly in the picture. And another little feature to make sure you've got red clover as opposed to other clovers which might have reddish flowers. In red clover, the uppermost leaf is very close up beneath the inflorescence, almost adjoining it, really close. Still with the pea family, now we've got some yellow flowers, little bunches of yellow flowers. Incidentally, these flowers still have the standard of the wings, it's just that they're very much smaller. This is lesser trefoil, but there is a confusion species which also has yellow bunches of yellow flowers, and that's black medic. The big difference, easy difference to see distinguish between the two, is this, what we call mucro, this little point at the apex of each leaflet, which is not on the lesser trefoil. That's just a little tuft of hairs that you can see there. This is actually part of the leaf lamina. Okay, so that was the pea family, little review of them. And now we're moving on to another important family, the rose family. And we're starting with creeping cinquefoil. And you may well be thinking, well, hang on, this looks a bit like a buttercup. And it certainly does. It's got 5 yellow petals. It's got a lot of carpels and a lot of anthers and stamens. However, there are some differences. This species has what we call an epicalyx. Now remember, a calyx is the composition of sepals, a group of sepals. But this one, this is the best I can do, I'm afraid, for photographs. Here's one of the sepals, but beneath it is another sepal-like structure. So we have a ring of 5 sepals and then another ring of similar-looking organs, which we call the epicalyx. And that will, if you see that, you know you haven't got a buttercup. In this case, the petals are notched as well, which helps you to distinguish it. And very easy, the leaflets here are what we call palmately arranged, like the fingers of a hand. We've got, in this case, 5 leaflets. As creeping cinquefoil, its stems, you can see nicely here, these at the nodes, places where the leaves are coming from, that roots as it goes along. This is only slightly a confusion species. The flowers are similar to what we've just seen, but the leaves are completely different. And I've put this up especially, silverweed, because one of the features of the rose family is that when you have a leaf composed of leaflets, there are often these little leaflets, which we call intercalary leaflets, and they're between the larger leaflets. There are several members of the rose family that have that feature. Here's another member. Is there a, no, oh dear, sorry. So here it says the epicalyx is just visible. Calyx, epicalyx, calyx, epicalyx, calyx. And yes, sometimes woodavon has the intercalary leaflets as well. And when it's later in the season, we haven't quite got there this year yet, the seeds have nice hooked beaks with which to attach to passing animals and human trousers. Right, so now we're moving on to the cranesbill family. And the cranesbill family is named for its ripe carpels. It has this wonderful cranesbill-like organ here. This is to do with dispersal of the seeds. When it's really ripe, this part of the plant forms, it springs up, curls up, and in so doing, and the explosion, it throws out the seed from the base. So cranesbill, and you can just about see the cranesbill on this ripening plant here, which is Herb Robert. Herb Robert has nice pink flowers of 5 petals, which mature to this stage, and the leaflets of Herb Robert are very deeply lobed. As you can see, leaflet, this is a leaflet, this is the leaf, this is a leaflet, and it's very deeply lobed. More members of the cranesbill family. First of all, we have the cut-leaved cranesbill. That's easy to understand. The leaves are very deeply divided again. Little pink flowers. And then we have the dove's foot cranesbill. And the leaves of this are less deeply divided, same little pink flowers, but look at this stem. Look at the difference in the lengths of the hairs on the petiole and the stem. Wavy, long and short hairs all muddled up together. Quite a nice feature to help you identify dove's foot cranesbill. Okay, moving on to the pink family. What do we notice straight away? I think we notice that there are pairs of leaves opposite one another up the stem. Even here, you can see that the leaves are in pairs of different sizes as they move up the stem. And this plant on the left is common mouse-ear, another bit of a special. And this species has simple hairs on the back of the calyx, just ordinary white hairs. and it's a perennial plant. A perennial is usually quite easy to identify because during the flowering season, you will find stems that don't have any flowers on them. They're getting ready for next year, to flower next year. Opposite, we've got the sticky mouse here. And the sticky mouse here, to distinguish it from the common mouse here, you can just make out in this rather beautiful picture that there are sticky tips to the hairs. We call these glandular hairs, and stuff does stick to it, bits of dust and hairs, animal hairs and so on. Anything will stick to these. So sticky mouse here. And as I've said, this is an annual plant. This every shoot flowers, but by this time of the year, and just in case this, just to say this is going out in late May, this is beginning to die. This is already finished, more or less finished. It's getting its seed now and ready, and then the plant will die. And finally, just to mention with this particular species of the pink family, or these two, there are 5 stamens. 5 stamens. And that's mentioned because the next member of the pink family...
Do you mean 5?
Sorry, Nicola?
Is it 5 stigmas?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I said stamens, didn't I? It is 5 stigmas. Thank you for listening so carefully. Is the common chickweed. And this only has 3 stigmas. 1, 2, 3. So we immediately got something to distinguish it from the mouse ears. Nice photograph of a mat of it here. What you might notice with common chickweed is that you might think, oh, look, 10 petals. But look more closely and you'll see that at the base of these 2, they're joined together. So in fact, these are 5 petals, which are split pretty well right to the base, bifid petals. And this rather nice picture, which is from the Nature Spot, well, all these pictures are from the Nature Spot website, but this is a nice one with nice red arrows. And what it's pointing to is that common chickweed tends to have just a single row of hairs up the stem. And I thought it was particularly interesting to see that after the node, they come up a different side of the stem. Nice picture. Okay, moving on to the knotweed family, which has a special feature which makes it very easy to spot, and that is the sheathing stipule. A stipule is an outgrowth, a leaf-like outgrowth quite often, which comes from the same axil as the leaf itself. But in this particular family, this stipule tends to be membranous, see-through, and wrap itself right around the stem above the leaf joint, a sheathing stipule. And that's a nice feature for the knotweed family. The species illustrated here and here is broadleaf dock. And this has a cordate leaf base. And that means that the base of the leaf it's like the tip of a child's drawing of a heart. And so we've got these lobes of leaf which project lower than the central part of the leaf. So cordate leaf base. And this species also has toothed tepals. Now, a tepal it's a name we use for petals that tend to be very similar, look all the same around the flower. For instance, you saw in the Buttercup family, you saw the petals and the sepal. If the petal and the sepal look the same as one another. We tend to call them tepals, and we don't have to distinguish. In this case, the tepal is this part of the flower here, and it has teeth, prominent teeth on the edges. And that's a nice feature for a broadleaf dock. And also, I wanted to show you that it's not easy to see, but there's another example of this sheathing stipule that rises up the stem, right around the stem, from just at the point where the leaf joins the stem. Okay, another member of this dock genus is curled dock, very well named because the lower leaves are very wavy edged, undulate. Super picture of a really good example of a curled dock. And in curled dock, the tepals are not toothed. They're what we call entire, smooth edged. Moving on to the Bedstraw family, and immediately I think you'll recognize that these leaves of this family, they are arranged in whorls around the stem. Gap, and then another set of another whorl of leaves arranged around the stem. Nice and easy to see just here too. That's a good indication of Bedstraw family. And this particular one is called cleavers. It has a stem with backward facing prickles. And I expect many of you will recognize that because they're so prickly, they catch on clothing. So hence the name cleavers. When you tear off a bit of this plant or throw it at somebody's coat, it sticks. Cleavers. Here's some other members of the Bedstraw family which look a bit like cleavers. This is hedge bedstraw. You get a bit excited when you see hedge bedstraw. It's not so common. And you notice that the stems of this species are smooth. They don't have prickles at all. So that's a nice, easy distinction. Rather shiny, isn't it? Because of the lack of prickles almost everywhere. And then there's a lady's bedstraw, which has yellow flowers, which helps to distinguish it. Still with the leaves in whorls around the stem, but these leaves have them leaf margins, their edges. I hope you can see it in this picture. It rolls underneath. So you can't actually see the edge of the leaf because it's rolled tightly underneath, up to the midrib, underneath the leaf. So two other bedstraws, hedge bedstraw, lady's bedstraw. Right, moving on to the Speedwells. And here we've got, as you can see, a typical flower where the lowest petal tends to be just that little bit smaller than the other three. And all Speedwells have just two stamens, just two stamens. They also have a capsule, which will develop into holding the seed. It's in two lobes which diverge. In some species, they don't diverge as much as in this species. And here's a nice one that you should get a little bit excited about, Germander Speedwell. And in this case, the flowers are in little conical arrangement of a number of flowers, which we call a raceme, coming from one point at the stem. I think you can see that there. They come from in Speedwells, the flowers grow from the axils of the leaf, where the leaf joins the stem. But in Germander Speedwell, they're in racemes. Here's a species which has very similar looking flowers, but you can see that each flower is just solitary on its own, coming from the leaf axil. This is common field speedwell. And I hope this doesn't confuse. I'm now going back to the germander speedwell, because one of the special features that helps you distinguish that as well is the fact that it often has 2 rows of hairs, one on each side of the stem, especially lower down the stem. That'll distinguish it from this one on the left. Plantain family. Here we have a family where the leaves are in flat rosettes, or rosettes, perhaps they're not so flat here. This one, often they are flat. All the leaves grow from the ground in a basal rosette. The inflorescence, the flower spike, is of many very small flowers. And they're arranged cylindrically around a stem, which is leafless, because all the leaves are basal. And we have greater plantain on the left here. This has, the leaves of this species have a distinct stalk or petiole. The stalk is important, that it's distinct. You can see it there, there's another one. And the leaves also rather blunt at their apex, whereas with this species, the ribwork plantain, the leaves taper to their base. It's much harder to say where the leaf stops and the petiole starts. They just taper uniformly right to the base, and they have a much sharper and acute apex. Dead-nettle family. This one tends to have square stems. You can feel that between your fingers. It's just lightly grip the stem and you'll feel that squareness, and you'll feel it stick. You can't twiddle it between your fingers. Its leaves are opposite, and probably the really most important thing, the corolla, which is petals, is fused into a tube with an upper lip here or there, and a lower lip here. So this tube, it's probably 5 petals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fused at the end that joins onto the stem into a tube. This species is ground ivy. It has rather kidney-shaped leaves with blunt teeth. Oh, and this upper lip tends to be rather short and turned up, so you can see easily right into the corolla tube. Other members of the dead-nettle family have bigger, longer top lips. This is almost hooded. This is white dead-nettle. You can see, by the way, where the dead-nettle name for the family comes, because the leaves do look rather like nettle, stinging nettle. And here's another one, the red dead-nettle. These leaves are a little bit more like the one we saw on the previous page, the ground ivy. But they both have square stems, and the flowers look, I think, not to split hairs too much, they're in whorls around the stem. Big family of species now, the daisy family. This is characterized by the fact that it has many very small flowers, which we sometimes call florets, bunched together on the top of the flower stalk. So what we're looking at here is not a flower. It's about, goodness knows, over 100 very small flowers. And what you're seeing is petals of various lengths. Each one of these petals is a different flower. So that's a huge number of flowers. you can see that quite clearly when it produces the seed head, because each one of these plumes attached to a seed is just from one of the flowers. Now, you know this one, the dandelion. Oh yes, I didn't say, for dandelion, the flower stem has no leaves. It's completely naked, and there's only one flower head per stem. From the ground up, one flower head. The leaves are in a basal rosette again, and they are lobed leaves, and the lobes tend to be rather triangular, sharply triangular dandelion. Here's a dandelion look-alike, the prickly sow thistle, but there are obvious differences as well. Lots more flowers per flowering stem, leaves up the stem. And we know this is prickly sow thistle not only because it feels a little bit prickly, but also a nice distinguishing feature is that the base of the stem leaf has this very rounded outline, and it wraps itself right around close to the stem in this rounded shape. That's part of the leaf we sometimes call an auricle. Whereas the smooth sow thistle, which we see pretty well as often, has many of the same features, many dandelion flowers on one stem, leaves up the stem, but the auricle of the smooth sow thistle is got one very straight edge. So we're not looking at that circle pattern, but a very straight edge to the base of the leaf at the auricle. I'm guessing that most people recognize a daisy, flat to the plant that grows flat to the ground. The leaves are very flat to the ground, evergreen, and it has two different kinds of flowers, which we perhaps again might have thought of that as a flower, but no. Each one of those, I'll start there, as it says, disc florets. Each one, this part of the flower is called the disc, and it's composed of about, who knows how many, 100 more little tiny flowers, yellow with yellow petals fused together. And then it also has these white petaled flowers, florets, all around the outside. So we've got two different kinds of flowers on this inflorescence. Here's another daisy, the oxeye daisy, bit of a special again. But this daisy, although it has all those similar features about the flower, it has leaves that grow on the flowering stem. So that's easy. It's a tall plant, easy to distinguish. Here we have another member of the daisy family, groundsel. It's an annual, it's relatively small, but interestingly, the petal tips of this inflorescence, and there's a bunch of maybe 50 flowers here, they only just show above the bracts which are beneath the inflorescence. We call these bracts, sometimes they're called involucral bracts. And another difficult word, filaries, is one that I tend to use more. Filaries. We can't call them a calyx because each of the flowers within this bunch here has its own calyx. So these are involucral bracts or filaries. And with groundsel, the leaves are deeply lobed. Very closely related to groundsel is common ragwort. It's a larger plant. it has the same deeply lobed leaves, but common ragwort has ray florets as well as disc florets. Also, thistles are in the Dalsy family. The one on the left here is spear thistle. This is a plant which, after flowering, produces seed and dies. It's monocarpic. Quite often its life cycle is within the year. And this is a very spiny plant, and it does even have wings up the stem with spines, as well as the lobes of the leaves, which are spined. And that contrasts nicely with the creeping thistle. This is a perennial, so this goes to sleep but stays underground in the winter and then re-emerges. It creeps under the ground, hence its name. And whereas this spear thistle, you will tend to see it one on its own, you will usually find a group of stems of creeping thistle close to one another. And the stem here has no spiny wings. It's quite smooth. The spines are restricted to the leaf lobes. Also in the Dalsy family, but this time with many capitula or flowering heads on each flowering stem, and with very finely divided leaves, which make it very easy to recognize in the verge. The leaves are 2 or even 4 times pinnate, and that's yarrow. Very quickly, the ivy family. The only plant I want to talk about is ivy. It's just because you see it a lot, and it spreads across the ground as well as growing up trees. The fruit is a berry, and you can still see those now. There's still berries on the from last November's flowers. It climbs by means of little rootlets that grow from the back of the stem. And I think the word that I need you to get used to is this word umbel. It means that the flowers are at the top of the flowering stem, are arranged outwards like the spokes of an umbrella. And we call that an umbel of flowers. The inflorescence is an umbel. And the big family, which is famous for its umbels, is the carrot family. The flowers are 5-petaled. I can't show you that, I don't think, in this picture. And the fruits, rather than berries with the ivy, the berries, the fruit with the carrot family is a dry fruit. It's called a schizocarp. And what we've got here is hogweed. Flowers in umbels. This is the umbel. But you will notice, I think you can just about make out in that at the end of each umbel spoke, there is another umbel. So it's a compound umbel. We have another set of spokes at the tip of each first spoke. And the leaves of hogweed are once pinnate. This is the leaf. And here are the leaflets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at least. And the leaflets are large and they're very coarsely lobed. Hogweed. And also from the carrot family, but with leaves which are more pinnate. In other words, we have the main stem of the leaf, and then we have once pinnate these branches, and then furthermore another set of branching here, which makes it twice pinnate, and sometimes even these little structures can be divided right to the base, making it 3 times pinnate. Cow parsley. And here, oh yes, 5, I did mention the 5 petalled flowers, and you can see them here. And also another interesting feature, which you sometimes get with the carrot family, the outer flowers in the umbel on the outer edge have larger petals than the ones nearer the middle. It's an interesting way, perhaps, of the plant attracting insects, cow parsley. Okay, so I've come to the end of my introduction now, and I just thought I'd finish. Nicola, I don't know if you're the only person who might be able to answer these 3 questions, which I wondered if people would know. First of all, do you recognise this plant?
Yes, I do.
Could you tell us what it is?
I would think it's a stinging nettle.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, second question. Do you recognise this plant?
I do.
Yes. And what is it?
I would call it blackberry common bramble.
Yeah, bramble is brilliant. Absolutely. Next question is just slightly harder, and don't feel upset if you don't know the answer. I suspect you do. Do you know what family it belongs to?
Bramble?
Yeah. Okay. I'll put you out of your misery. It's in the rose family. So that's what it produces. At the end, it produces these wonderful brambles. And that's a little reward. The picture of a bramble is a little reward for being patient and listening to this expose of some of the most common species I hope you'll find when you do your Verge surveys.
I do have both of those in my garden.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Russell. That was really useful. I feel I could go and score highly in Scrabble now using some of your terms.
I'm trying to escape. Trying to escape, Dave, but I can't stop screen sharing.
You have stopped screen sharing.
No, you stopped. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So for those of you who are watching,
hello.
Then there's a reminder that we'll be meeting on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Just remind us of the meeting place, Russell.
Yes, okay. Evington, very near the centre of Evington, just off the main street is a road called Goodwood Road. It's part of a circular road around Leicester. And there are traffic lights where Wood Road meets Main Street. Turn up Goodwood Road and take then the first on the left, which is called...
We have sent out the kind of instructions, so check back in your emails.
It's called Gifford Close, and there's usually a few parking spaces on that road. I wouldn't park on the main Goodwood Road, but off one of those sites. It's all like one big road there. The verges are so wide, you've actually got 3 parallel roads with verge in between. It's a good spot for botany.
Great, look forward to it. Also, just to say that all of those species that Russell's covered tonight are on an ID sheet, which you can download for free from the Nature Spot website. If you go to ID Help and then look up Leicestershire ID Guides, you'll see a guide to Verge wildflowers. So thank you everybody for joining, and I look forward to seeing some of you at least on Sunday. Thank you.
And thank you very much, all of you. Sorry I joined a bit late, but no, I apologise for anyone that didn't get the link. I've been off today. It did send to the majority, but some of them it hasn't sent to. So I'll make sure we send the recording. But yeah, hopefully everyone got the instructions anyway, as for the session on Sunday. But have a great time. Unfortunately,